whole earth was of one language and one speech. It so happened as they journeyed from the east, they found a valley in the land of Shinar, and they stayed there. And each man said to his associate, "Listen up, we will mold bricks and cook them." And they had the bricks instead of stone and asphalt for mortar. And then they said, "Listen up, we will build for ourselves a city and a tower, and its top will reach to the heavens. And we will make a name for ourselves, so we won't be scattered over the face of the earth." And Yahweh said, "Look, the people have one language, and now they are starting to do this. Nothing which they plan to do will be out of reach for them. Listen up, we will go down and disintegrate their language, so that no one will understand each other." So Yahweh scattered them from there over the face of the earth, and they abandoned the building of the city. So God called that place Babylon, because Yahweh disintegrated the language of the entire earth, and from there Yahweh scattered them over the face of all the earth.
My sister did not live past her 23rd birthday. A group of men raped and killed her. They stuffed her in a dumpster 3 blocks from our apartment.
My brother worked in an emergency room downtown. A drug addict came in with a wound to his ribs. My brother tried to dress the wound. He pulled a gun from his jacket, and he shot my brother through his left eye.
My husband, Michael, left for the supermarket at 9:15 in the morning. He was found with no money and no clothes in the East River 3 days later.
My father was shot by a business partner, who then hanged himself in my father's closet. They had argued over money. I am a professor. I teach American history at the University of Pennsylvania. I have an idea that I would like to talk to you about.
If you haven't seen M. Night Shyamalan's The Village, I don't necessarily recommend it, unless you're up for a full dose of fear, failure, and tragedy, with a twist, of course, as is Shyamalan's signature, as we've seen in virtually all the feature films, at least the ones he wrote, tend to go that direction, like Sixth Sense and Signs and whatnot. I do recommend it if you want a full dose of truth as a church leader. Shyamalan's The Village is nothing short of an indictment of organized religion, in my opinion, particularly of Christianity, and its epic failure to live up to the vision that Jesus had for it so long ago. From start to finish, The Village portrays images of hope crushed by despair, laughter and joy crushed by fear, love crushed by tragedy, knowledge crushed by ignorance, freedom crushed by oppression, as deep sorrow hunts down its prey like rabid dogs. At the end, a glimmer of hope. Hope for joy, for love, for knowledge, for freedom is stamped out, finally, by the real enemy, fear. Here's just a sampling of the lives ruled by fear in The Village.
A splendid present.
Be cautious. You're holding the bad color.
This color attracts those we don't speak of. You must bury it. You ought not to pick that color berry anymore.
He picked it from his pocket.
What's wrong? Your breathing has changed.
I've never set eyes on these before. You
did not pick that now. Where did you find this? You have to think of the towns, Fenton.
The towns? What for? Are wicked places where wicked people live. That's all.
I often wondered if you and my son bonded because neither of you is fond of speaking. You're very kind. You must pardon my manners. I haven't slept in many nights. You may run from sorrow as we have. Sorrow will find you. It can smell you.
Stop. You needn't be scared. We have the magic rocks. They will keep us safe.
Why have we not heard of these rocks before? Stop, please. Do not leave us.
There's nothing to fear.
Then why do you wear the cloak of the safe color?
We will light torches. It will be safe.
It is forbidden. Please stop.
If you haven't seen The Village, here's the Cliff's Notes version of the film. A few spoiler alerts in here, so if you want to go watch it before I get into it, that's cool. But if not, here we go. Several people who have tragically lost loved ones in their lives choose to seclude themselves from the world in a walled village in a wooded area, presumably in rural eastern Pennsylvania. The story picks up the lives of these individuals at a point where the village is flourishing with population as compared to the 6 or 7 who started the community. It's advancing in technology. It has looks like some sort of oil or maybe even electricity for lighting and different things. But it's stricken often with tragedy as children die of curable diseases within the secluded village. The mentally disturbed suffer without any medication or aid or counseling or any of that sort of thing. Children are blind from presumably treatable illnesses. Somehow the pain of losing loved ones in the real world made it worth it to these people to cause untold pain on themselves and their progeny in the village. The original founders of the village keep their subjects at bay, their subjects being their own children, with sheer and utter fear and horror. The founders call themselves elders in the film, and they've created this story that these carnivorous creatures live in the surrounding woods, ready to attack, kill, and anyone who dares venture past the village's borders. The elders have evidently set up megaphones out in the woods, and they project these moans and cries from the forest, certain to deter any who even think of venturing into the woods. There's only a bit of hope. A half-crazed man who seeks the village's destruction. He seems like the antagonist, really, on its face, but if the village is ever to... those oppressed there are ever to escape, he's the only hope. Everyone else has kind of accepted hook, line, and sinker the propaganda of the village, except for this kind of crazy guy, including 2 lovers who are the future of the village's existence. And unless this crazy guy, this insane man, succeeds, the people are doomed to the oppression of the village. And at the end, the crazy guy fails, and he's unable to break free of the confines of the village. And again, on its face, the film seems to have a happy ending. The blind girl, one of the lovers, who's the future of the village, the girl is blind, and her would-be husband is stabbed by this crazy guy, and she goes to get medicine for her lover so that the village may continue, and she makes it. But in my estimation, the story ends tragically, where the fear and the oppression will rule the lives of generations to come.
Ivy has returned with medicines from the towns. She was attacked by a creature and killed it.
We will find him. We will give him a proper burial. We will tell the others he was killed by the creatures. Your son has made our stories real. Noah has given us a chance to continue this place. If that is something we still wish for.
So evidently what happened was this crazy man found one of the monster suits the elders used to put on and masquerade in and scare the other villagers. And he got it, went out to the woods, and while this blind girl was trekking across the woods trying to get somewhere to get medicine for this her wounded lover, this guy attacked her with the suit on, and she was able to kill him. And because of that, not only did the blind girl believe there actually were creatures out there, but the elders were going to be able to tell the rest of the village that this mentally disturbed person wandered into the forbidden woods and kind of got what was coming to him. This film shakes me to the core. It's unsettling. Really, the Christ figure, the would-be savior in the film, the one that's going to actually, whether intentional or not, destroy or is trying to destroy the villages. This figure is probably the most tragic aspect. The hopeful redeemer is crazed and a violent individual who is, ironically enough, named Noah. What's more is the Savior fails in his efforts, and at the end, he dies in a tomb not to be raised. It's clear his efforts were to destroy the village and maybe free the people, again, whether on purpose or not, but this was just not to be, and the village was able to continue. The real irony, again, to the casual viewer, is that this has a happy ending. The blind girl returns with the penicillin to cure her lover's wounds, and the village will continue on indefinitely into the future. But from my perspective, the ending is nothing short of tragic. It keeps pace with the rest of this wretched story. The fear, the oppression, the unnecessary deaths of children will continue. See, these people completed the city and the Tower of Babel. They succeeded. Where once upon a time God's grace prevented a tragedy of seclusion and oppression, the tale of Shyamalan's village speaks of a Tower of Babel that worked. Let's see. So here's and here's some comparisons between the two. The people of the earth, as recorded in Genesis, found a place where they could settle, far away from their perceived enemies, as did the people of the village. The people of the earth at that time feared a non-existent enemy, as did the people of the village. I mean, conceivably, the people found in Genesis 11 represented all of humankind. They were all together on the earth at that time, and yet they still feared some outside source that may come in and destroy and scatter them. They wanted to build something godlike. They wanted to build a name for themselves. And just like the people found in Genesis, the people of the village instilled fear in their own ranks that an unseen, unknown force might destroy them if they moved beyond the boundaries of the village, or in the case of Genesis, the community. The account of the Tower of Babel in Genesis and the movie The Village should challenge us as a church on a number of levels. First of all, how are we using a fear of an imagined enemy to control others, whether intentionally or unintentionally? I mean, the elders of the village, they just wanted to keep people safe, right? But they used fear of an imagined enemy, an imagined danger, to control people. In the most extreme cases, fundamentalist Christians have forbidden certain things outright as dangerous tools of the forces of darkness, right? Among the forbidden and similar to the village's bad color is popular culture. We fear that in the church. And obviously, I mean, I rail against that too, but by saying things like, I can hear God's voice in the pop culture, but to varying degrees, this notion in the modern church is taboo. It's the bad color. It's a popular culture, so there's something suspect about it. I remember once I was interviewing, we called it candidating, for a youth minister position in Detroit. As part of the interview, I was supposed to lead this weekly youth gathering in a study of Scripture, of course, right? And I chose Numbers 22, from like the last cast, the story of Balaam and his ass, and I used Eminem's song just like I did in the last cast, that rap "Dream On," and I had a few other clips on a CD, and so I gave it to the guy controlling the sound system, and I said, "You just play the clips in order when I give you the cue, when I point at you to play this one." And I went off to do something else. And a few minutes later, he came back up to me. He says, I can't play this. And I'm like, I thought there was something wrong with the CD. Why is there, I said, like, there's something wrong with the CD? Did it not record right or something? He's like, no, this is a church service for teenagers. I can't play Eminem here. I was like, okay. And after some wrangling and arguing, and my assurance that I had permission from the lead pastor, said he agreed to play the clips. He wasn't happy about it, but he did it. It was a taboo there, even though I was attempting to use Eminem to illustrate the truths of God. Something he just felt like, it's bad. We can't, it's the bad color. We have to get rid of it. It can't be a part of things. And little did he know, he was falling victim to what I guess I would call the Tower of Babel syndrome, where we build a structure and a system that walls us off from the outside world out of fear that the world's influence will destroy us. I mean, do you see the problem with this? I mean, what are we saying as God's people when we say that we fear someone like Eminem or pop culture? We say that we're powerless against it. We have to wall ourselves off from it. We say that if we're exposed to its influence, we will collapse and give in to their notions of morality or culture or whatever. We in fact say that the power of God and the truth of God's word is powerless against this dangerous enemy, and it must be shut out and totally excluded from our lives. This is what the ancients thought as well. They believed that if they didn't build this intimidating and walled fortress with a huge tower, that they would be destroyed by some unknown outside force. And the people of the village resigned themselves to hiding in fear from the world out of a twisted motive of self-preservation. We as a church believe that we need, to varying degrees, we need to wall ourselves off from our own culture in order to survive. Now you say, oh, no, Matt, not my church. Really? Really? Yeah, try using a secular song as a worship song up front and see what kind of reaction you get from people. If you've done that, try using music that is entirely from the pop culture as your music and worship set next Sunday. So no worship tunes out of Nashville, right? But Matt, people might get mad, right? We take out their favorite hymns and worship tunes. That's a age-old argument, right? Right, but I'm not saying do that, but imagine. I mean, what would be the reaction, and why? Why are they angry about these things? Why does it upset them? Just like in that clip where the blind girl Ivy, it's like this is the bad color. You ought not pick this berry. We should bury it. We should take it out of our sight. Why is there so much fear and angry? Is it because they don't think God can speak through anything unless it's got a certain label on it, a Christian label? The point is, if you personally don't fear pop culture as a church leader, then I guarantee you've got people in your congregation who do, who think that somehow that's out there, that's stuff that stays out there, it doesn't come in here. How are you going to rescue them from their prison of fear? How are you going to teach them that compared to the power of God through Jesus, the world's power is nothing, and it's not to be feared, and it's not something that we have to shut out of our lives? Secondly, a beyond challenging statement, indeed a disturbing statement from Genesis 11 is this: we will make a name for ourselves. We will make a name for ourselves. I used to work for DirecTV in the Houston, Texas area. Every so often, I would pass by Lakewood Church, which is the building owned by Joel Osteen's ministries. When you travel on Highway 59, goes right by the building. If you go north, you can see on the I guess what would be the southwestern side of the building, see Lakewood Church illuminated very brightly. And just as you pass by, just as big, just as bright, and probably even more colorful, is this huge illuminated sign that says Joel Osteen Ministries and his logo. And traveling the other way, that's all you can see is Joel Osteen Ministries, the logo, lit up big and bright on that building. So here we have this godlike building, an auditorium that gathers over 16,000 people in one sitting, with the church's name and the minister's name bright and beautiful right on the side of the building. Listen to the words of Genesis 11 again. We will build for ourselves a city and a tower, and its top will reach to the heavens, and we will make a name for ourselves. I grew up in a town of about 800. Lakewood has built what people from my town would consider a small city. Indeed, the building gathers about 50,000 people on a weekend typically. That is a small city. Lakewood isn't a skyscraper, so I guess it's got that going for it, but its prominence among the structures of downtown Houston is unmistakable. You see it every time you go by. Anyone with a passing familiarity of this organization knows Lakewood and Osteen have certainly made a name for themselves. In Osteen's case, you're hard to find any occasion where Lakewood Church is not accompanied by a Joel Osteen ministry. Those words, making a name for not only the church but for themselves. Now, before you go, right on, Matt, that's ridiculous. They're trying to build the modern day Tower of Babel, and that's wrong, right? They're bringing glory to themselves instead of Jesus. Ask yourself this: how many of you have a church building? How many of you have signs, and God forbid, marquees identifying your building as a place where your church meets. I have a kind of a disdain for marquees. Anyway, how many of the signs have the minister's name on it? Another thing that kind of drives me crazy. In fact, I remember one church, again, when I was working for DirecTV, actually in Sugar Land, the church had a stone sign, and the minister had his name chiseled in stone on the sign. I thought that was awesome. Do you put ads in the paper? Do you put out signs around the community about your church? What about church bulletins? Is your church's name printed on them? Does it list the names of the clergy working there? What about websites? How many places is your ugly mug or the ugly mug of your minister posted? I mean, isn't this at least a form, no matter how small, of building a name for yourself? A tower, a building? And now you're flipping over. Oh, you're just being ridiculous, man. Come on. Well, am I? You know, how much of that stuff has as its purpose to make a name for your church, or even for you as an individual minister? Honestly, ask yourself: is this just informational? Which is, and how much are we trying to make a name for ourselves? These are good questions to ask, I think. I mean, why do we need to know who the minister of your church is, and have it printed in the bulletin or on the sign, or have his picture and his bio on the church? What's the real purpose of that? I have to ask myself that. What's the real purpose in me trying to do this podcast? Am I trying to make a name for myself? If I came to your building for a service, wouldn't it be obvious who the lead minister is, right? I mean, he or she is getting up to give a 45-minute or an hour lecture on something, right? What's the need to have the name in there, I guess? I don't know. It's just questions. But it leads me to this. I challenge you. Ministers, I challenge you. I feel like I'm an anime cartoon. Pikachu, I choose you. Pastor John, I challenge you. Anyway, really, think about how much you're trying to make a name for yourself. What things do you do that are really for productive informational purposes, and what's just promoting your own name? One thing I don't think we see about the Tower of Babel is that the city, the tower, and the people's name might have also had as its purpose to flag others who were lost to come into the protection of the city, to hole up there with everyone else. And this might be confusing to some of us. I thought we were supposed to get lost people to come into our building and into the protection of the church. We have God here, after all. And if we can just get them to come, they can have God too. This reminds me of a joke. I like jokes, so I'll share a joke with you. There were 3 sheep farmers who got together and decided they were going to have a contest to see who could build the biggest sheep pen. Each man was given the same amount of material and time with which to construct his pen. The first pen was magnificent. It was strong and sturdy and held about 100 sheep. The good thing about his pen was that there was no way for the sheep to escape. The second pen was even better. The farmer figured out a way to double the use of his materials, making it able to hold twice as many sheep, and kept them from being able to escape. The third man's pen was, well, different. After many hours and a lot of wasted material, he ended up with an enclosure that had only space for himself. He's standing there with this fence around him. The 2 other farmers laughed at him and said, "Well, looks like you lose." The third farmer, standing presumably inside his tiny pen, said, "Not so fast. See, I'm not standing in my pen. You are. My pen can hold limitless sheep." Right? See, the point is, church, we don't have God in here. God is not in our buildings. God is where we gather, sure. But we don't have the goods. We haven't contained God in our structures. And we don't have to tell people, come in here to get God. God is out there. Our message to people should not be come in here and find God. Our message to people via our actions, not our words, not our clever advertising campaigns, should be God works in the world and we join God in the work out there. See, the main point of the story of the Tower of Babel and Shyamalan's The Village is to teach us that God's desire for God's people is not for us to hole up in a sanctuary of safety and wait around to die. Notice I used the word sanctuary. All of our buildings have them. And kind of on an aside here, I can assure you that the overwhelming majority of our local church communities in America put money and resources towards buildings and lands at a rate that eclipses just about anything else we put effort and money towards. Some of you say, oh, no, Matt, no, our mortgage is only $10,000 a month, and we pay over $100,000 a month in size for the stuff. Well, that's great. Okay, that's at least you're putting your money toward people. And if that's the case, though, you're probably sitting on a multi-million-dollar piece of property. What's the purpose of having that kind of money tied up in property? So we can gather, right? And flag the rest of the community. This is where you should come if you want to gather before God and not be scattered. Forgive me if I'm piling on too much here. But am I saying, we should stop advertising? We should stop putting our names in the bulletin? We should stop building church signs and multi-million-dollar buildings? Is this wrong? Yes. I'm saying to a degree, this is what the account of the Tower of Babel warns us against. And so, before you tune me out and just say, okay, well, he's telling me to tear down my building, so I'm going to move on. Hang tough. Let me get one more thing in here about tower building, and then we'll talk about maybe what we can do to kind of start to walk away from this, like the people in Genesis 11 did when their language was confounded. They walked away from it. And we'll talk about that in a minute, but let's talk about tower building. We build for ourselves. Genesis 11 says we built for ourselves a tower, and its top reached to the heavens. Now go back to Olstein. I'll bag on him some more. What does Olstein and his state-of-the-art, quote-unquote, worship services shoot for each weekend? Could it be a top-of-the-tower experience? You ever hear someone in your congregation say, oh man, I was high on Jesus after that worship service? Are we building a tower each Sunday that is meant to reach to the heavens in some way? Am I becoming an old fuddy-duddy who says rock and roll is of the devil and poo-poo to high-powered, high-tech, well-performed music in church? Well, let's hope not. I mean, if rock and roll is of the devil, then I overdose on the devil as a full-on hard metalhead. I mean, I pretty much listen to it all the time. Now, my point is we need to ask ourselves and take a look at if we're trying to leverage some mountaintop, high tower experience for people every weekend and communicating to them that the experience of highly emotional worship is what following Jesus is all about. They come in here for God. God is not out there. Once they leave the confines of our sanctuary and our high-powered worship, God goes away. Are we saying to our people, look, just show up on Sunday and get your fix, and you're good, the rest of the week. Come gather with us in the tower that reaches to heaven, and you won't be scattered the rest of the week because God is in here, not out there, and you need this. See, the word here in Genesis and in numerous other references, God directs us and moves us to scatter more than God asks us to gather as a church. Esther 8 says there's a certain people scattered among the people in all the provinces of your kingdom, and their laws are different from all the other peoples, and none of them do the laws of the king. Psalm 44 teaches us to be scattered among the nations. Matthew 28, Jesus says, be going and make disciples. He doesn't say, be gathering and make disciples. He said, be going and make disciples, right? You guys know all this. Acts 1, you will be my witnesses in Jerusalem, in the city around you, in entire Judea, the country around you, in Samaria, foreign countries, and to the limits of the earth. Be going. You guys know this. They were scattered. Acts 8 teaches us they were scattered abroad and went everywhere bringing the word of the good news. Right? We forget this sometimes, I think. I mean, we know it in our minds, but pragmatically, what we say to the world is, you have to come in here to find God. And look, honestly, there's nothing wrong with gathering on occasion, but it shouldn't be our focus. Honestly, look at your congregation. How is your local body doing things that works only to make a name for yourself? How much time, energy, and effort, money, the resources, how much of that is put towards gathering? How much of it is put toward scattering? I mean, some of you will reject this notion out of hand. You know, oh, whatever. We'll just go on about our business. Okay, it's cool. I'm just a guy on a podcast, right? I mean, what power do I have over you? But for the few of you saying, yeah, old Matt has a point here. But what am I going to do? Ask my board to sell our property? Stop having weekly services? Why not? Why not? Okay, but hold on. At the same time, I know that's not reality. And I'd offer this little metaphor. How do you eat an elephant, right? One bite at a time. You see your church trying to make a name for itself. You see yourself trying to make a name for yourself. Congregation addicted to your rock shows. You understand that too much of your church's resources are going towards gathering instead of going out. Start simply. You don't have to tear down the building yet. Take your staff's name out of the bulletin for starters. I mean, again, some of this is pet peeve stuff for me, but it leads back to this idea of making a name for yourselves. Take your names out of the bulletin. Take your names, your ugly mugs off the website, for pity's sake. Simple thing, but that might get a conversation going about why you did that. Stop spending money on advertising. To me, that's just laziness. That says, okay, well, we stuck the sign out there, so we don't have to go out and talk to anybody anymore. We can just hole up in here and then hole up in our homes through the week and then get back to church and get our fix. I would imagine the trick, I guess, is to get people talking about this issue and educating them on it, and then talk about how your church can, one step at a time, go from a congregation that focuses on gathering and spends more resources on going out. Start asking others about what their imagined fears are, like pop culture. Pose a question to your church board. Are we spending more effort making a name for ourselves? Or are we spending our effort promoting the name of Jesus in the community? Do something small that is symbolic of abandoning the building of that city and that tower, and moves towards scattering out into the wilderness as the people of God. I'll finish the cast with this story. A few weeks ago, I was sitting outside one of the Allegheny County courthouses in Pennsylvania, and I was awaiting a hearing on a ticket I'd received for traveling on a restricted highway. If you don't know, I'm a trucker, and I'm not sure what I was thinking that night when I got the ticket. For some reason, in my mind, I needed to go one more light, and before I could get turned around, I was busted. Anyway, that's not what I want to talk about. I was sitting in this strip mall, and as I sat in the parking lot, I saw a quite peculiar thing. The courthouse was in this small strip mall, and in the strip mall was a church building, and I forget the name of it, but at one point around 10 or so in the morning, this hip-looking guy, he looked to be about college age, came up to the slot the church rented in the strip mall, and he pulled out his key to the door, unlocked the door, crossed the threshold, went into the building, shut the door behind him, and locked the door. How strange to lock your church building at 10 in the morning on a weekday. I mean, you'd think you'd like prop the door open, especially in a strip mall like that. Hey, come on, come in, check us out. I mean, the building had a contemporary look. The guy had a contemporary look, as if to say, we welcome contemporaries. But he locked the door behind him. What did he fear? Didn't seem like a bad neighborhood. After all, the courthouse was with the swarm of police officers was right next door. It just didn't make sense. I mean, if he was trying to get some alone time with God, that's cool. Jesus did that, right? I mean, it's probably what he's going for. Start the day off alone and then open the door. I mean, I give him the benefit of the doubt. I didn't see what happened after that, but that's really not the point. The point is that what I saw that day is a striking simile to how we do church often today. We hole up in the cities and the towers that are our buildings, and they'll lock the world out and say, you can try and come in here where God is, where it's safe, but no way are we going out to you. Anyway, again, I know I piled on a lot. There's a lot here. And again, I would encourage you, if you think some of what I'm saying is just bunk, I can't, Matt, we can't do that, but maybe there's some small ways you can start going out. And I'm not trying to beat anybody down with this. It just got me fired up. And when I get fired up, I tend to go over the top a little bit. But maybe we can take a little bit of this, and maybe there's one or two things in it for you. It just so happens, as I watched The Village, it reminded me of Genesis 11 and the account of the Tower of Babel. It sparked a sense in me that God was really trying to say something here, and I'm just passing it on. One ass did a movie. It reminded me, this ass, of a Bible passage. And ass 2, me, is just throwing it out there for anybody else to pick it up and run with it, should they feel so compelled.
Made it up myself, starving children.